Jim.
Why did the president call the U.S. justice system a joke and a laughing stock during his comments in the debate?
That's not what he said.
He said that the system of justice in this country is a
process.
joke.
He said the process has people calling us a joke and calling us a laughing stock. Look, I think, as I told Margaret, he's simply pointing out his frustration of how long that this process takes, how costly this process is, and particularly for someone to be a known terrorist, that process shouldn't move faster. That's the point he's making, and that's the frustration he has.
Separate subject, if I could, just other folks have a couple of questions each. Getting back to George Papadopoulos, does the president recall at that March 31st, 2016 meeting of his National Security Advisory Board, Mr. Papadopoulos suggesting a meeting between then candidate Trump and Vladimir Putin? Does he recall that?
No, I don't believe he does. April.
Sarah, two questions. First, Mary Frances Berry, the former head of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, says everyone wants vetting, but to stop people from coming because they come from different countries is totally wrong. What say you?
Nobody said because they come from a different country. I think that's the whole definition of immigration, is that they wouldn't be U.S. citizens. We certainly haven't said that immigration as a whole should be outlawed. So
the diversity lottery is specifically for those coming from other nations that you are not favoring right now because you believe that there is a possibility of terrorism.
I believe that we have a fundamental right to protect the people of this country, and if we see or think that someone is a threat to United States citizens, that we should take every precaution that we can to protect the people of this country. And I don't think most Americans would disagree with that. In fact, most Americans do support extreme vetting and certainly support the protection of the citizens of this country.
And second question, last question, compromise, the issue of compromise. What is the definition of compromise as it relates to slavery and the Civil War?
Look, I'm not going to get in and relitigate the Civil War. It's like I told you yesterday. I think I've addressed the concerns that a lot of people had and the questions that you had, and I'm not going to relitigate history here.
When you left, so, and I'm going to ask the question again. And
why don't you ask it in the way that you're apparently accusing me of being?
I'm not accusing. I'm asking a question, Sarah. Seriously, the question is: does this administration believe? Does this president believe slavery was wrong? And before you answer, Mary Frances Berry, a historian, said in 1860 there was a compromise. The compromise was to have southern states keep slavery, but the Confederacy fired on Fort Sumter that caused the Civil War. And because of the Civil War, what happened? The North won.
I think it is disgusting and absurd to suggest that anyone inside of this building would support slavery. Peter.
Yesterday from that podium you said all of our leaders have flaws. Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Kennedy. What are President Trump's flaws?
Probably that he has to deal with you guys on a daily basis.
In fairness, he doesn't deal with us on a daily basis. So what would you say in sincerity?
Most every day, actually,
So
he
what are
does.
his flaws then, I guess? Simple question.
Yeah, I just gave you one. John.
Sarah, in the hours, in fact the days after the horrific shooting in Las Vegas, the president repeatedly said, now is not the time to talk about policy, now is not the time to talk about politics, that's for another time, right now we need to mourn the dead. Yet this morning the president launched into a political argument with Senator Chuck Schumer on Twitter, literally hours after this incident yesterday. Why was he so quick to go the political route and point fingers at Chuck Schumer for the fact that this person was in the country at all?
Well, look, this wasn't about going the political route. This is something that, frankly, the president's been talking about for a long time. This isn't a new policy. This isn't a new position. This isn't a new conversation. The president has been talking about extreme vetting and the need for that for the purpose of protecting the citizens of this country since he was a candidate, long before he was ever president. This isn't a new argument, this isn't a new position, and this wasn't new for the president to speak about it. Kristen.
Sarah, I want to follow up on the question that John was asking you earlier. You're making the case that these are not new policies he's talking about. And yet the question still remains. He is delving into a policy and political discussion, and he and you were very clear after the Las Vegas shooting that it wasn't appropriate to talk about policy. So what's the difference now?
I said it wasn't appropriate to politicize the conversation, which I don't believe we are. We're talking about protecting American lives, And there are things that this president has consistently and repeatedly talked about, advocated for, pushed for, introduced executive orders for, supported legislation for, time and time again since long before he was even president of the United States, that support this position. It's not a new position. There are facts that we know about this horrific tragedy that we know caused some of the things in this horrific tragedy that I think determine what those policy positions that he's been advocating for long before yesterday are very consistent with the activity that could have prevented something like this from happening.
The president invoked Chuck Schumer's name, so how can you argue that it's not a political argument that he's making?
Look, Senator Schumer has supported these opposing policies, and I think that that is a very basic fact. Margaret.
It's not
voted against
unifying
them
the
for the Gang of
country.
Eight.
Is he failing
That's
to
not
unify
true.
the country at this
He
critical
helped.
moment?
He helped implement them on the front end long before the Gang of Eight, and the Gang of Eight would have only addressed one part of that problem, as we've talked about many times before. He may have helped isolate one part of the problem, but it would have exacerbated so many other parts of the problem that fall within our immigration system. If you only address one part and not in the totality of it, and introduce a fully and more responsible immigration reform like the president has proposed, like the president has outlined, then you're not addressing the problem, you're not fixing the problem, you're only making things worse.
Sarah, the president talked about wanting merit-based immigration today and then criticized the diversity visa program. Is he aware that the diversity visa program actually does have a merit-based component to it?
Look, there may be a component of it, but the fact that we have a lottery system that randomly decides who gets the greatest opportunity in the world, one of the best things that we have in this country is the fact that everybody wants to be here, and to give that away randomly, to have no vetting system, to have no way to determine who comes, why they're here, and if they want to contribute to society is a problem. And the president strongly supports making sure that the people that come here want to be here for the right reasons and not to bring harm to our country. And I don't think that's something that any American shouldn't want to support. Jim?
Are ranked by their job that they have had, and they have to have minimum education
Peter, the
requirements.
whole idea is that they are randomly selected. This isn't.
Criteria and having certain ranking. It's not entirely
It's the
random.
lowest level of criteria that any part of our immigration system has is through the lottery system. And so to try to argue that this is a system that thoroughly vets people is just shows a total lack of understanding for what this process is.
People have come in since the Uzbek gentleman yesterday came in. 350,000 people come to the country on this program. One of them now apparently has been accused of a terrorist act. One out of 350,000 create a problem then for that program?
There may be more. Look, all I know is that you can't randomly select people and not have them thoroughly vetted and not have the ability to know whether or not these people want to do good things or bad things when they get here. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that people that want to come to this country go through a vetting process to make sure that when they get here, they want to contribute to society and not harm the people of this country. Jordan?
Thank you, Sarah. On Senator Schumer, can you tell us when is the last time he and the president spoke, and more broadly, the president saying that he is responsible, at least in part, for this attack? Does the president still see him
Before
as
you
someone?
go any further, let
does
me
the
be really
president
clear.
still
The
see him as
president has
someone-
not blamed Senator Schumer and doesn't feel that the senator is responsible for the attack. We believe very strongly that the individual who carried out the attack is responsible and no one else. However, we do think that there are policies that could be put in place that help protect American citizens. We've been talking about those for a long time, and we continue to push and advocate for those policies.
Does the president still see Senator Schumer as someone he can work with?
I think we'd love to work with Senator Schumer to pass legislation on extreme vetting, and if he's willing to do that, we would absolutely welcome his support on it. I'm going to take one last question. Right here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Nope, right here.
Thank you, Sarah. Will President President Trump look for enhancing anti-terror measures with other foreign countries during his visit to Asia? And also, will President Trump call the leaders of Argentina and Belgium to express his condolence?
I believe that arrangements are being made for him to speak with the leaders of those countries. They're working between the two teams to set that up. In terms of looking for conversations around anti-terrorism, that will certainly be discussed throughout the trip over the next several days. And as I said earlier this week, General McMaster will be here tomorrow to discuss the trip in more detail and certainly in more depth for the briefing tomorrow. Thanks so much and have a good day. We'll let you know later today what time that should be. But both will most likely take place in the afternoon. Thanks, guys.